Hey, James. Oh, there
Hey,
you are.
hey, how's it going?
How are you?
Good to see you. Yeah, it's been a minute.
Everything looks different. Your hair is flowing. The plants have grown.
That's right. Yeah, last time I think we did one of these was maybe 3 years ago in the middle of the pandemic. I think I was at that point living out your way in San Diego. And so now I've actually moved back into Washington, D.C. The plants are here. Yeah, I'm flown. It's the summer. Yeah, keeping it chill.
Amazing. Well, you look great. Your work looks great. It's always good to catch up. So we'll let people trickle in for a little bit, and I'm going to do a little brief intro, and then I would love for you to also kind of give an intro about your work and just the state of things. So we know James Trallie is the amazing 3D based kind of naturalist designer that he is, based in DC. And he works at the intersection of science and art to create dreamy, otherworldly scenes and immersive content. You're definitely known for your work. You're known for your aesthetic. You're known for these places that you have created. So apart from just what I said, like, I'd love to hear from you kind of what you do, how you started, what you're doing now. I know you also work at NASA, which is also a fun fact.
Yeah, I do like kind of a very strange mix of things. I guess it's always kind of been that way. I grew up kind of blending science and film always through a lot of what I did. Really got into animation recently within the past couple of years with 3D type of software, and kind of just parlayed that into both the freelancing work that I do with all of you with H+, all the projects we put together. A lot of fun stuff that we've done over the past couple of years for that. And then, yeah, you mentioned the NASA angle too. So yeah, I started work at NASA after I graduated from university about 4 years ago now. And that role has also really evolved quite a bit too, from just initially doing production for videos, creating different things for all the planetary science missions, to now actually being a host in front of the camera for a lot of our launch broadcasts, mission broadcasts. I got a couple coming up here actually for some of the missions I'm working on. And then a lot of other projects too. I do a lot of immersive content too. We did a big piece in Unreal Engine about a year or so ago with one of the asteroids that we just sampled about a year or two ago. We made this experience where you can kind of like stand on the surface and look around as if you're like actually standing on this asteroid, taking it in 3D in real life, like in wherever you are in your living room. So it's been a really fun journey, and I feel like there's still so much more to learn and do, and really been trying to learn some new software, collaborate with some new artists, photographers, and so it's just been awesome.
Totally. It's so fun, so cool to me how relevant that is with like the work that you do, and I love to see the crossover, and I love to see how you kind of blend your two outlets, your two major outlets, and I've just loved to kind of watch how your work has developed over the last couple of years of working together. So when you started out with NASA, like you said, you've kind of grown into your position, things have changed. Is that something that you want to keep doing on the side? I know that obviously your 3D work that you do, and I believe you work in Blender, is that right?
Mostly Blender, but also a lot of Unreal Engine, Cinema 4D, Redshift, a lot of those different things. But yeah, I guess mainly Blender, especially the kind of stuff I put out in terms of tutorials. I try to make it in Blender since it's free, easily accessible for most people.
Oh, cool. So is your like personal work benefit the work that you do with NASA simultaneously? I feel like there's a lot of crossover there.
Yeah, I think one kind of inspires the other, and vice versa. It's been really helpful for me to kind of, I guess, learn a lot of the software, learn a lot of the techniques, and I can apply to my NASA products. And then a lot of the stuff I'm doing for NASA, a lot of new techniques, crazy data visualizations type stuff we do, really informs like a lot of the different things I do for my freelance too. I feel like I've learned a lot through just the approach to kind of creative endeavors and just really discovering these things and just really learning throughout the process.
That's so cool. I'm going to pause and say thank you everyone for joining us. This is H+ artist James Trallie, again, based out of DC, talking about his work, his workflow. We'll open it up at the end to a Q&A, but for now I just kind of wanted to chat with you. So, I mean, together we've worked on some really cool projects. We've done some really cool exhibitions. We've done a lot in the last, couple of years, even during the pandemic. But what are some things that you want to get into more like personally, so that I'm aware, so that we're like manifesting it to the universe? Is there any things that you're trying to learn, people you're trying to work with, like what are you excited about?
I think my favorite projects that we worked on and ones I think I'm hoping to do in the future are all the ones with musicians, because they really understand the creative process themselves, because obviously they're making music, they're doing a lot of the same stuff that we do, just with a different medium. So it's always really fun to just kind of sit down with them, listen to their music. As I'm kind of creating my artwork and my renders, I'll usually just have their stuff on loop as I'm just kind of creating. So it's always really fun to just do that process and listen to it. And then to actually go and see your artwork, you know, at a concert. I've had a chance actually to see some of my work here in DC that's been in concert, some of the stuff I've created with H+. It is just kind of a surreal experience, and seeing other people enjoying it as well too, experiencing it at a concert, really just getting immersed in both the music and the kind of world that I've built around that music. Super special. And then a lot of the stuff that goes with it, like the album artwork, you know, the different visualizers that you have on the YouTube channels for these artists, is just such a fun process. And so, yeah, there's a lot of musicians I feel like I'd want to work with going forward that already do this kind of super cool immersive stuff, like Zoo or Rufus Du Sol or Odessa. A lot of those kind of EDM electronica artists, they always really value that kind of immersive aspect of their concerts, and they've done some really cool pop-ups. I know Rufus Du Sol did a really cool concert out of Joshua Tree a couple of years ago with like this really awesome light show live as they're kind of performing. So some of that immersive stuff and really trying to think about how my artwork could kind of work in that scenario would be really awesome to do.
Yeah. Everyone that you mentioned is like in our peripheral, and some we've worked with, and all of them I could see your work fitting in super well with. So that's always cool for me to hear, and for the universe to hear, and you know, for everyone to get it out there. But yeah, you touched on something about like the in-person and seeing your work live, and you know, seeing it as part of the performance. And I mean, I know that I kind of drill this in, but just doing the shows that we do, doing the events, doing the client stuff, and like having a chance to see it in person and in real life is like such a game changer. I mean, your work looks great on the screen, everyone looks great on the screen, but like, you know, I recommend everyone get out and see art as much as you can. And if you have the opportunity to see, you know, something live shows, like really notice the visuals and all of the artists that go into this kind of stuff. It's so cool.
Yeah, there's so much stuff. And I know one thing I did last year, which was super cool and very different from what I've usually done, was I created these kind of animations for like a yoga studio here. They had this kind of pop-up event where they had like screens kind of all around while they're doing like their yoga and meditation. It was just kind of an immersive thing for people as they're relaxing to kind of feel like they're in this like tropical dream world. Like a lot of my stuff is very tropical influenced, you know, very relaxing, kind of like my background, I guess, here. So it's nice to kind of make that experience a little bit more immersive for people as they're meditating.
Yeah. Would like set the perfect tone, the perfect landscape for like a meditation, open eye, closed eye, like visualization thing. I mean, get a little vibey soundtrack going with it, and it's like you're right there.
Yeah, exactly. It's awesome. I love doing it. It's just, for me too, it's kind of meditative, the process of creating to begin with. So I just like kind of having that carry through to the end product as well as you're actually seeing it play out.
Totally. I want to talk about your compositions a little bit. They're pretty surreal. There's a lot of water happening. There's a lot of like kind of dream world-esque nature elements. Are there things that you're like, I mean, I know you're repeatedly drawn to some of the things, but do you know where any of that reference comes from? Like the locations, the nature, the water, are these specific things, or these dream spaces?
Yeah, a lot of it's inspired by real life places that I've visited. I think one of the favorite things of mine to do when I go to a new city or a new town is to just go for like a long run with kind of no destination in mind, just kind of wandering around. I'll take my phone or my pocket camera with me and just take pictures of what I see. I'm often inspired by like a lot of what I see out in nature. For me, I think the biggest inspiration for a lot of the work I've done is actually there's a national park in the south of France called the Calanque in a town called Marseille, like a huge city down there in the Mediterranean. Beautiful place, and kind of wherever you go, it's just very connected to nature, very connected to the Mediterranean, to the sea. So that kind of surrounds everything that you see in real life there. So it's been cool to kind of try to recreate that in 3D. And for me, it was such a nostalgic experience of kind of living in this beautiful place and just every day waking up and you know, going for runs in this beautiful national park. I really channel like a lot of that in the work I do. And then seasonally here too, in DC, we experience all 4 seasons. So it's really fun to kind of see the landscape around you change throughout the year. We've got really cool tulips that bloom in the spring. The cherry blossoms are obviously huge here in DC. So certainly when I'm going out for runs and kind of seeing that in real life, I love bringing that into 3D. And we just did a project recently for Bombay Sapphire where I channeled exactly that, the cherry blossoms that were here in full bloom. So a lot of that stuff for me. And then, you know, certainly dreams as well too. There's, you know, stuff I try to, like, in the middle of the night, I'll you know, jot stuff down that I had a dream about. I wake up in the morning, a lot of it's just kind of chaotic notes, but some of it's like, hey, that's actually something that I can maybe run with and create. And then certainly listening to music as well too. I think just the inspiration of very relaxing music and soundscapes really just makes me very, inspired to create different things.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So you take photos for reference a lot too.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've got so many things. And then also I have one of the newer iPhones with LiDAR, so I can do like 3D scans. So sometimes I'll actually like scan rocks or cool things that I see out in nature. And I can actually bring those specific objects into my renders, like the plants or rocks and stuff that I see. So it's always kind of cool to do that. So
that's so cool. I mean, the world is crazy. It's just getting like, for a creative brain, there's just so many outlets, and it's getting easier and easier to kind of fantasize these, concepts, these spaces, and bring them to real life. But talking about just kind of tips and tricks and tools and stuff that you use, what are some of your like necessities and go-tos when you're working, but also in your studio?
Yeah, I think so. I have a 2-monitor setup. I think it's been helpful for me to have a second monitor. For a while, I was just creating off a work laptop. I think actually the last time we did one of these chats, I had like a gaming laptop that I was using temporarily. But just kind of being able to spread out and really have a second screen up a lot of my reference photos that I took out in the field has been really helpful for me to kind of see, because I feel like you can often lose touch of what is photorealistic as you're creating things. You kind of forget, what light looks like in real life, or what textures and different things of trees and the scenes around you look like. So it's helpful to just have that as a reference up next to me. So when I'm working, that's crucial. In terms of software, I think I started in Blender, really learning a lot of stuff there. So that being free and having such a great community around it to just ask questions. I'm a part of a lot of different, communities where we'll just chat about different problems and stuff we run into. That's been immensely helpful for me as well too. I've got a pretty close partnership with NVIDIA as well, so they often will send me a lot of their new GPUs, which has been really helpful to kind of speed up the render process. For a while, stuff was so slow for me rendering. It would take like literally days to render stuff out. So it's been awesome to now actually speed up that process, and stuff happens so much quicker. So that's been great too, having kind of like the next gen GPUs to be able to work with. And then also just my camera too, and being able to go outside and capture things and have those just ready to go when I'm able to start creating is always very helpful too.
Cool. Yeah. And your stuff. You touched on this a little bit, but I want to talk about maybe the educational content that you do. I know you do stuff on YouTube. I know a lot of the reels that you post are kind of like, informative stuff. And I think that that's super valuable for people. Do you want to talk about just kind of like your sharing and your channel and kind of what you do and how you offer it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. For me, it was, very, very helpful to have tutorials like the ones I create when I was first starting out. I really just learned a lot from fellow creators on YouTube of just how to navigate around the software. It was all so completely different and so new to me. And so it's kind of my way of paying it forward to the next generation of artists, or 3D artists in general, to just kind of create this as a resource for them to use and really make it accessible. I release a lot of my project files over on Patreon, or just for free oftentimes on YouTube as well, just so people can kind of play around and see how I operate. So that's been just my way of kind of paying it forward. I last year actually made a course with a company called Domestika that was a little bit more fleshed out, so people can actually follow along and kind of contribute their own projects. There's like a big discussion board going on there. So it's just really helpful to have that resource available for people. And it's always really cool to just see when people will post like the resultant art that they made from one of my tutorials. It's kind of very like humbling and inspiring. It's like, wow, I'm glad that you're learning this software. I'm glad that you're joining this amazing community. There's just such an awesome community behind all this software, and just having that and being able to contribute to that in my own little way, my own little corner of that community is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, for anyone just kind of starting out, like the community is super valuable. The knowledge sharing is super valuable. The tutorials from people like James, just like the information of people that share it is, a really great way to learn. It's a really great YouTube resource. I feel like people can start and have a career just based off of YouTube, based off of kind of initiative learning like that. And that's really valuable. That's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really helpful. And I think sometimes it can be tough to want to ask for help with the work you're doing. You can kind of be like, oh, I can handle this on my own. But people are so helpful and just really willing to just take time to walk through stuff. I was always really impressed with that off the bat. I was like really humbled that people would, stoop to my level of a complete beginner to just walk me through something that in my mind was super complex, but for them it's probably super simple. But just really, really helpful to just have that insight from the get-go. And now paying that forward, there's still so much more to learn. This stuff moves so quickly, and there's like, now the addition of, AI artwork and those different softwares and things coming in to play now for a lot of the stuff we do. So just trying to adapt to the changing landscape. It's overwhelming at times, but it's also really cool because there's just always new stuff to do and keep you entertained as you're kind of learning.
Yeah, totally. Does AI make you scared? Do you see benefit in it with your work? Have you tried it with like concepting or sketching out ideas? Is this something that you've like touched on or played with at all?
Yeah, I play a lot with Midjourney just to get inspiration at times. I feel like it can't really replace the actual artwork that we're creating. There's just something different. You can kind of still tell that it's like a little bit off. It's in an uncanny valley, I feel like still. But for me, it's really helpful to kind of just put some of my own artwork in there in the machine and put some things in the prompt just to see what it spits out. And then it comes back with something I maybe never thought of before. And then I can take that into my software and model it out and kind of create it. And then, make an animation around it, make it more immersive. So for me, it's just helpful to kind of concept ideas and come up with things. And it's been cool to kind of see how it evolves. I'm not too afraid of it just yet. I mean, it's getting to a place where it could be kind of a little bit scary, but for now, I think it's still, in its very, very early stages. There's still, I feel like, so much more to develop with it. But seeing kind of how it's plugged in a little bit, even for some of the stuff for NASA, we've kind of talked a bit about how it can be used. There's a project that some of my friends at JPL, which is out your way, Pasadena, one of our NASA offices, they did a really cool project with the artist Beck about a year or two ago, I guess kind of before the big AI wave kind of took over. But they did this project where they used AI trained on just tons and tons of databases of imagery from the Hubble Space Telescope, a lot of imagery from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter of the Moon, to create this kind of reimagined view of the solar system, of the universe, of our own moon. So it's really cool to kind of see how they took that and spun it on its head. And there's still this very heavy scientific influence on the end product, but it's very creative and very, psychedelic in a way almost, but really neat. And with the music of Beck paired together, it's a perfect combo.
Yeah, that sounds super cool. In your own work, I mean, I know there's like this endless capabilities of where you could take it and what you want to do. Is there anything new that you want to explore, just kind of like concept wise or capabilities wise, and things that you want to develop and kind of start utilizing more or differently?
Yeah, I started dabbling this a little bit. I did a project with HP recently where they sent me one of their VR headsets to kind of create my own render to walk around in. And so doing more of that stuff and making my renders more accessible to you, the viewers, to walk around in, even if you just have your phone to just put in like a little headset, to explore these worlds and make it that much more immersive, I think would be awesome. So I've been really trying to learn a lot more of the different capabilities of Unreal Engine to make that possible, to bring these worlds to life. And then, to have them elsewhere out in public too. We were just talking about, some of the concerts and stuff. A lot of these art shows and pop-ups and new places to screen things. It's really just for me about bringing my artwork to just a totally new level for it to be so much more immersive for viewers, to really just step into these worlds as if it's right there wherever you are.
Yeah, totally. Have you ever done any sound design or audio stuff, or is there a way?
I am doing that so heavily right now for a couple TV series I'm developing. There's a couple that are coming out on our new streaming platform, NASA Plus, which we just announced like a week or two ago, and then also on Hulu too. So for that, it's been so much work on the back end, really doing a lot of sound design. We've got an audio booth at my campus at NASA where I'll record a lot of audio. And then also I do a lot of mixing, mastering, just to make sure that the soundscape underneath everything kind of flows seamlessly and really makes it this just very immersive experience as you're watching, our TV series. So it's been so fun to do that. I should show you the timeline for my Adobe Premiere file. It's just layers and layers and layers of just sounds and everything mixed together. It's kind of overwhelming, but I'm trying to get a bit better with like the labeling, the color coding and stuff for things, so I can kind of look at it at a glance. But yeah, it's cool. I want to do a lot more of that for my renders too. I think it's fun. I'm inspired by a couple other artists on here who do that kind of work, where they're also musicians on the side, creating that, kind of fusing that with their animations or different artwork. Yeah,
I mean, your work is so like experiential. I feel like you could experience it. Your kind of audio trickling, landscapey vibe. This would be something really fun to play with.
Absolutely. Yeah, really having that pairing is awesome.
Hear that series? I think it came out in the 70s called Environments. It was just like recorded soundscapes. They're really cool covers. It's called Environments. It's on Spotify, but it's just like an ocean day.
Yeah, I love this. I think there's the kind of like, I guess, a more modern version of that where there's these like kind of ambience, I think is the whole subgenre on YouTube where people have these like 3 or 4 hour like looping nature sounds with some kind of animation. It's kind of like the lo-fi girl, the lo-fi beast to study to. A lot of that stuff I love. It's great. It's just cool to have that on in the background when you're just doing other work. But yeah, really having those immersive experiences is really neat.
Yeah, totally. I think so too. I want to hear a little bit about what's inspiring you. If there's like artists that you always go towards, artists that you look up to, or anyone that helped you kind of pave your path. What's been really influential to you, kind of getting to where you are today, or now even?
Yeah, I feel like I've always very much been inspired by impressionistic artwork. A lot of, Claude Monet, Van Gogh, these kind of, worlds that exist at the boundary of the real and surreal. They're obviously painting real places, but there's something very just otherworldly about the experience. So very much channeling that in my artwork has always been an inspiration. There's a couple artists. There's one who's been a painter, I think, for a number of years, but he's kind of transitioned into creating a lot more stuff and posting his work here on Instagram. I believe he goes by the name of Thomas Sanchez Studio. He creates these kind of tropical paintings that look really fascinating. It's like huge palm trees and framed in super unique ways, where it kind of feels like you're almost looking like through like a portal, like a gateway, into this like tropical paradise. A lot of film photography too. I often will see, that's pretty much my entire explore page is like film photography. It's something I've been trying to get into myself here too, just because it has that certain feeling to it, that certain like nostalgia, the color palette, the graininess of it. It's just really just tells such a deeper, richer story. So really trying to channel that. I've always tried to do that with my renders, kind of channel that like bit of filmic look to it. So I always tap into that kind of stuff too. And then I've really been enjoying looking at a lot of like vintage travel posters recently. A lot of really cool like old concert posters too. One of my favorite groups is Greta Van Fleet. They did a series of really cool concert posters. I actually got one last year when I went to one of their concerts that is in this kind of weird nostalgic style of kind of the desert Southwest and this weird like kind of gilded tropical almost vibe, oasis vibe to it. So a lot of that stuff has been really cool to kind of channel and just see and create art kind of inspired by that as well.
Cool. Oasis is a good word for some of your work.
Yeah.
What about like the surrealism elements? I feel like you're blending kind of like unrealistic situations, kind of surreal, water inside of a room, stuff like that. Is surrealism something that you're drawn to?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I think just having it still feel familiar to the viewer is, I think, always really at the core of what I do. It's just, I want it to feel like a place that actually exists. And it's always really funny to see comments that people put in my videos or my animations. They're like, where is this place? I just had a piece that a lot of people enjoyed this past week I posted up where they're like, where can I visit this? Is this like an Airbnb you can book, whatever? So kind of keeping that element of like attached to reality, but just pushing it like ever so slightly beyond is really awesome. And certainly, yeah, surrealism plays a huge part in like a lot of that as well.
I mean, I'm sure there might be some actual spaces out there that look like yours, and I would love if we could rent them and go there and visit them like an Airbnb. I love that idea, like finding the one that matches it and doing a partnership with them.
Oh, absolutely. That's the next big goal is to do like some kind of interior design project. I've seen some people do that before. There's one of my friend artists on here, his name's Joe Mortel. He did an experience recently where I think they kind of remade his world, one of his renders, into kind of like a real place, almost like kind of this Art Deco airport lounge type thing, with like a lot of tropical plants and stuff. So building something like that in real life would be awesome. Then making this big like experiential thing. We've got this really cool museum here in DC called the Building Museum where they do stuff like that sometimes, where they'll kind of build out like a unique space that you can kind of come in and like just chill and take pictures in. So yeah, creating something like that would be really awesome.
That's so cool. Thank you for everyone that's joining us. We're going to chat here with James for another couple minutes, and then I'm going to open it up to a Q&A for everyone. If you wanted to, you can press that little bubble with a question mark down below, and you can put a question in there. You can put it in the scrolling feed, and we'll get to anyone's questions coming up in a minute here. I just kind of lost my train of thought. Oh, I wanted to ask you about all of the amazing museums in DC. Is that something that you do frequently?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, they're mostly free, all the Smithsonian ones. So you could just kind of pop in and out of all of them in like just over the course of a weekend. So it's really fun to kind of just bounce around and get inspiration from them. I often will go to the Air and Space Museum because obviously that's very connected to the work I do for NASA. And then, yeah, like some of the other ones that are a little bit more unique, like the Building Museum I mentioned, it's one that's paid for, but they have these really cool exhibitions that come through. We have an art tech house here. I know there's one, I think, in New York, maybe one in LA as well, I'm not sure. But I just got a chance to go there recently with NASA. We're doing a collaboration with them for the James Webb Space Telescope. Some of the imagery is kind of featured in like one of their immersive shows. So it's been cool to kind of see those as well. It gets inspiration for me for how I'd maybe want to design one of these spaces in real life too. And so many cool concert venues here in DC too that all kind of have a different flavor to them. There's a couple of different ones I've designed products for as well. There's one called the 930 Club that's like a very intimate space, like really kind of neat. You know, feels like you're there with your friends, even if it's like a couple hundred people, still feels very intimate. We've got a bigger one called the Anthem, where I actually just went to meet up with M83. They did a performance there, so it was cool to see them live. Got a chance to talk to them afterwards about some of the work they're doing. So that is really neat to see and just kind of experience the whole different artistic landscape. I guess I didn't really expect that coming to DC. It's something that was really important to me living in California, was just the connection to the arts and culture. It felt like it was everywhere. There's so many great museums, so many awesome concert venues, but I wasn't sure about that with DC. I'm like, it's DC, it's, you know, politics, that's all there is there. But there's such an amazing scene here, and that's just been really cool to discover and really just become a part of as well with a lot of the creativity that I'm doing here.
Yeah, totally. And endless inspo with the museums and stuff. Just to humanize you a little bit, I want to hear about your day-to-day and your setup. Do you work at home? Is this kind of like a day in the life of James? Are you like, when do you find time for your 3D work that you do? Do you like kind of section it out? What's the normal workflow day for you?
Yeah, so I guess since the pandemic, we've been largely remote for NASA. That's like been my full-time job since day one. So that allowed me to actually work remote in California for a while. I kind of just adjusted my hours, so I was working East Coast hours, but it was nice because I would clock out at like 2 p.m., go to the beach and surf, or just like, you know, just relax. And so now that I'm living on the East Coast, obviously I'm working East Coast hours. So I typically am working from home. I've got a really nice setup here. I've got 2 cats, Apollo and Artemis, that have joined me in this space, which is kind of fun to have them around when I'm working at home. I'm not too far from my office. I work at Goddard Space Flight Center, which is just up the way in Maryland. So when I do go into office, I was actually in yesterday, I'll go there to film products, be on camera for different things, record stuff in the audio booth. And then beyond that, I'll usually spend a lot of time on my 3D work over the weekends or after I'm done with my work for my 9 to 5. For me, it doesn't feel like work though. None of the stuff does really, even the NASA work. It feels like just playtime for me because it's creating stuff and I just get to really just be inspired by so many different things. And with NASA, it's just so cool to kind of see the science as it's happening in real time. You know, I get to work with these incredible scientists who are, you know, charting new unexplored paths deeper out into the universe, into the solar system. And then being able to kind of channel that into video products has been just a really awesome experience day to day. So I get to talk to them a lot. I'm having meetings, I'm filming with them behind the scenes. I've traveled a lot for work too in the past couple of months. For one of the missions I'm covering, OSIRIS-REx, we're actually bringing a sample back from an asteroid in the end of September 24th. And so I was just actually out like a week or two ago in Utah, way out in the desert. We've been doing like a lot of different rehearsals to kind of prepare for this sample return event in this super remote area. It's actually the largest military controlled airspace in the country. So we've kind of booked this space for the sample capsule to return through and land in the desert. And so we've been kind of running through that. It was really cool to just be out there, spend every day out in this super cool remote desert environment, observing the scientists as they're kind of preparing for this crazy otherworldly event. I'm actually going back out there again in a couple weeks too. And then I'm actually going to Texas in middle of October. There's the annular eclipse that's going to be passing through there. And I'm going to be one of the commentators, you know, talking to the public through that event live. So it's very different day to day. Always very creative though. And so I feel like there's never a dull moment, and it's always just a lot of inspiration and just kind of learning new things almost every day, both in terms of the creative stuff I do, in terms of the science. It's been so great to still stay connected to that because that is very much the core of my background. I was a geophysics major in undergrad, so I kind of keep that energy going through like a lot of the stuff I do as well, which has been awesome. And yeah, then beyond that, like a lot of running around town. I'm actually training for the New York Marathon right now, so it's been a lot of been trying to do about like 40, 50 miles a week, just to kind of keep up the pace and get ready for that big race. So that's been also a good chance for me to capture some, photos, render inspiration as I'm out running around town. So it's been busy. It's been a lot, but always really fun. Cool stuff going on almost all the time, it seems like.
Amazing. If anyone missed that, I don't want you to miss that. James is getting meteors. James is helping get meteors from outer space. And I'm going to say, James is also our go-to guy for information about aliens. And I can't believe we haven't talked about this yet. Because if anybody knows stuff, let's get the scoop. Are the aliens hot? Are they coming? Or did they ask about me? Hang on.
Yeah, there was that crazy briefing. I was actually out in the desert when that briefing was going on a couple weeks ago about it. But yeah, it's a fascinating topic to kind of dig into, and I'm very curious to see kind of what we discover as we go forward. I really think that in our lifetime we're going to find life in the universe, because we've got this amazing new telescope, the Webb telescope, that is able to bring incredible imagery back here to Earth in ways that we've really never seen before. We're stretching, almost back to the Big Bang with a lot of the imagery that we're getting, looking so deep into just the history of the universe. And so I feel like it's got to happen, right? We've got to stumble across maybe a habitable planet at some point, maybe a life form. I feel like we're not necessarily looking for the right things even, because we don't really know what life could even be outside of what we know here on Earth. So there's just still so much to discover, and it's been cool because I've been working on a lot of projects with Webb too. So I've been getting to see this imagery as it comes back, like in real time. So, fingers crossed that we find something. It will like literally just completely change our life here, our existence. It just would shatter everything that we know. So that world-changing moment could happen in the future. We'll see.
Yeah, I want to keep you posted. If you see something on your telescopes, let me know, because
keeping an eye out.
One of the first people to see it. You're just gonna have like the everything, and you'll probably just start putting it in your work and be little like Easter eggs for people to find, and the truth comes out.
The signs will be in there. Yeah, that's right.
In there, the signs are in there. I love that. Feel free, if you want to ask James questions, we're going to open it up to a little bit of Q&A here. I have one that was, is there any advice you would share to artists trying to find their style?
Yeah, that's a good question. That was something that I feel like I struggled with for a really long time, because, you're flooded with other artwork. When you go on social media platforms, I feel like it can be overwhelming to just see just the myriad of different styles and approaches that people take to creation. And you see what's successful too. It's kind of unfortunate that a lot of things are like a numbers game, I feel like, on social media, especially as you're just starting out. So you kind of feel like you maybe need to create like a certain style or kind of box yourself into something. But like, it's been really helpful to just kind of experiment and just see what inspires you personally. I think you can really tell when someone's passion, their vision is really coming through, when they're actually just focusing on just the joy of creation and not trying to create for X, Y, Z purpose, just creating for themselves and really building, their own style. It takes a lot of time to develop that. I feel like I'm still developing my own style, even though it kind of feels like maybe I have a style that's recognizable, I guess, at this point. But it's always a learning process, and don't be afraid to try new things and go out and look elsewhere for inspiration. Like I just mentioned, like a lot of different places I look for inspiration. Feel free to just get creative and just take a step back from the computer too. I think it's very easy to get siloed in and just feel like you're stuck in this like one creative rut where you're just doing the same thing over and over. Just taking a step back and then coming back with a fresh set of eyes, a fresh perspective on things, and then creating based off that, I think is just really refreshing and can maybe help you a lot as you try to define your own style.
Yeah, totally. We have a question for, sorry, I'm going to butcher this name, Dairy. Asks, do you have any advice for creating stories that go past 10 seconds? I spend a lot of times on shorter animations and I want to make longer animations. Yeah,
I think storyboarding things out is really helpful. I do a lot of animations for the projects for NASA, and everything starts with scripts and storyboards to make sure that we're going the right direction with things, that there is going to be a complete narrative, and really spending a lot of time in that process. You can also do a lot of animatics first, so you don't have to spend too much time really detailing out the scenes. Adding a lot of different, very intensive things can slow you down, and you can maybe feel like you're just focusing too much on like one specific scene. instead of just getting that larger story crafted out. And then once you have that in place, going back and adding in more detail, spending a lot of time. So really roughing things out, it's, you know, no pain and just putting simple blocks. For a lot of the first cuts of stuff that I do for a lot of the client projects even, we'll just send kind of just a rough flavor of what we're going for, you know, just boxes and simple shapes around the scene just to kind of show the camera perspective that we're trying to show. You know, for characters, if you will, it's just like a simple dummy or something that we'll place in the scene, just to have something there for you to visualize and begin to kind of think about that story that you want to craft.
Yeah, that's helpful, just a little kind of guidance there. Another question, do you have any advice to share for finding new clients?
Yeah, I think there's what I did when I first started out, and it was, you know, rough going as you're trying to establish a name for yourself. Just don't be afraid to reach out to people. I think it's helpful to have kind of a resume or, you know, just a nice portfolio put together with some of your best work, and really be selective with things too. Don't feel like you need to have like many pages. Really choose your best artwork, your best animations, and just have that very clearly displayed. If you've worked on projects maybe for your schoolwork or just stuff that you've done, sometimes it's helpful to even do kind of like mock projects as if you're doing like a client project already, and include stuff like that just to show what you can do. Is really helpful for when you're approaching a client. Instead of just cold calling someone, having that backing up and being able to point to specific things that you can do personally, I think is really helpful. It's really tough when you're just starting out. I know I've been there. You know, it's tough when you're just trying to make a name for yourself and you need experience, but you can't get experience because you're not able to get that first job or get your foot in the door. Sometimes you have to kind of, you know, work for some lower paying things or lower tier things, maybe just to get your foot in the door and kind of work your way up there. You know, applying to specific jobs too. Obviously I work for NASA as my main job. So, you know, having that obviously brings like a lot of projects in just on my day-to-day as well. But yeah, if you're doing freelance, just have that backing of a really solid portfolio.
Yeah, I think, James, you're a great example of somebody that like has something consistent, has a job that, you know, feeds you, that inspires you, that helps you give into the work that you do personally. So it's maybe not such a pressure on yourself to survive off of your personal work all the time. I mean, it's doable. It's like there's so many situations out there for, you know, to support people's, you know, workflow, especially if they're just starting out. I mean, don't feel like you have to do it all in a day, or like you need to, you know, make a full income off just your art. I mean, there's options like getting a job that you like and, you know, something that benefits your personal work too. I think you've done that really well. Yeah,
and these things really come in waves too. Sometimes you'll just go through a dry spell. I think recently, you know, with a lot of the different things with the economy kind of struggling recently, it seems like there was, you know, kind of not as many jobs coming up for different creators to do. So you'll go through times when there's not a lot going on. You can kind of feel a little bit stressed out that you're not finding work. And then other times, like now, for example, it feels like all of a sudden everything's happening at once. So it's very much stuff comes in waves, and you kind of have to temper your expectations and really just stay focused on creating and finding that inspiration. It can be really hard at times, but, you know, just staying focused and, you know, tapping into a good community too, I think is helpful, just to kind of share your thoughts and what you're doing with other artists.
Yeah, totally. Another kind of technical question for you. How do you work on separate scenes in Blender when you need to create different shots?
Yeah, I guess you can do a lot of stuff in the same projects in Blender and kind of have stuff really place very well in collections that you can kind of figure out, you know, what's in what part of your scene, what's in another part. You can kind of turn ones on and off so that you're not overloading your computer as you're working. And then also just creating separate project files too, bringing things back and forth in between. There's a couple different ways you can go. And then also being sure to label everything. I think that's always very helpful. A beginner tip starting out, I think, don't underestimate the importance of labeling things, especially when you're going back and there's like 1,000 layers in After Effects and Blender. And you're like, what is object 273? Like, what does that apply to? And so having stuff very clearly labeled is very helpful to kind of go through when you're making those larger scenes and kind of keeping tabs on everything that's going on.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Organization, even though it can be a little bit tedious, it'll definitely help you in the end.
Absolutely.
What are other tips or advice just about workflow or balance or things that just kind of help make your life easier, that about your setup, or, you know, I don't know, music that you listen to? Is there anything in just your, you know, creative workflow that has benefited you that you want to share?
Yeah, I think just really taking time for yourself to just step away oftentimes from the computer, like I said before, just to get, a little bit of that separation, a little bit of that, inspiration from your surroundings, and then come back and kind of keep creating. I think having your head so buried in the work, it's kind of puts you in a bit of a funk sometimes if you're a little bit too focused in on one thing. So kind of just stepping back. I often, when I'm working in like Photoshop or Blender, will have like a window of my scene open up in kind of like a thumbnail version, because it kind of helps me see, if I'm just looking at this from like really far away, like kind of squinting my eyes, what the overall composition would look like from a distance. Because you can often just get so zoomed in on like the very, minute little details of your scene, of your final image, that you really lose sight of the larger composition, of the larger story that you're trying to tell in the first place. So having that like little thumbnail view has always really helped me just kind of keep an eye. I was actually just working on some thumbnail designs today for a project, and just keeping that little composition in mind from a distance. So like when someone comes up on my TV show as they're scrolling through Hulu, whatever, that's what draws their eye in, and that's what they see first up. And so if I'm focusing on all these two little details, it's not really going to matter if someone just scrolls right past it. They don't even notice it. So yeah, I think doing that as well really helps, and just taking a step back just to look at your scene.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Another question from Childlike Manny. How did James become a part of H Plus creative team, and how can an artist like myself also become a part of a creative agency? James, do you remember how we met?
I think I came across some work by some other H Plus artists a couple years back. I'm like, that is awesome. I would love to do something like that. And I was just getting into 3D design at this point in time. I think before that I was doing like a lot of just mainly photography. I think I was just finishing up with university too when I first came across a lot of the work that H Plus was doing. And so at the time, I was very photography based, and had done a little bit of stuff with Photoshop and like some 2D compositions, kind of photo bashing stuff together, but hadn't really dabbled in 3D. And I think I initially like approached H Plus with just a photo background, but the work that we do is very 3D, very immersive. And so I didn't quite have that yet. And I kind of made it like a challenge to myself to really learn the software. And I think I remember like I came back like a year later and I showed you some of my work. You're like, oh, your photography has really improved a lot. I'm like, oh no, this is renders. These are 3D. Like, wait a minute. Okay. Now let's talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally remember now. I remember we had talked back and forth for a couple years, and I was just kind of watching your work evolve. And then when it got to the place where I was like, oh my God, this guy is so talented, then, I thought that it would be an amazing fit to start supporting your work and helping you kind of gain clients and, gain our trust and stuff like that. So in answer to this guy's question, or girl, sorry, their question, I would say when we take on artists, it's a submission-based process. We do specific outreach to artists. But in James's case, we'd been talking for years, and just kind of, he kept me updated on his progress, and he kept building out his personal work. And it's not immediate. It's like building up your career, building up your work. And I'm really glad that it happened. But it's anyone's creative career path trajectory. It's like it's something to develop for yourself. And then when we come in, we support artists that are ready to kind of take that next step. So
there's no point kind of trying to follow any kind of trajectory. It's really just completely up to you how you want to approach it. And then also, like you said, there, it wasn't instant. It took a couple of years for me to get comfortable in the software and ultimately become a part of the roster. And I think a lot of how stuff is now, it feels like it's that instant gratification, like you're immediately going to create something and then all of a sudden have it go viral or be successful. But it takes time to learn this stuff, and it's very complex software. There's still so much I feel like I still have to learn with it. And so really just kind of keeping humble through the whole process, and really just taking the time to learn and to engage and really just improve yourself and continue to improve yourself, I think is super important.
Totally. A couple more questions just came in. LiveFrame254. Do you have to master all industry level 3D software? And if not, which ones really do you recommend? So I guess they're asking about which software you would recommend. If you have to just choose one or two, what would you say would be the imperative ones?
I think a great one to start with is Blender, because it's free. There's no, sunk cost going into it. A lot of the software is very expensive. Stuff like Maya or Houdini or, Cinema 4D even, they require very expensive licenses that, if you're just starting out, especially if you're just a student, you don't really have a lot of, finances to back your creative endeavors, it's a lot out of pocket to pay for these types of software. And there's also not too many resources that are free for them either. So if you want to learn the software, it can be tough to find, free tutorials to learn. Whereas for Blender, I mean, I'm a little bit biased here because I create tutorials for Blender, but there's just such a huge community behind it that's completely free. You can just type into YouTube. There's just literally hundreds of thousands of tutorials that people have created that can help you learn the software. And at the end of the day, a lot of the software is really the same. It's the same interface. It's kind of just different hotkeys. So I often will kind of bounce around a lot between the different software packages in my day-to-day. So, I'll work one day in Blender, I'm in Unreal the next day, maybe doing Redshift rendering the next day. And it always takes me like a minute or two as I'm kind of bouncing back and forth. I'm like, oh, right click is this, or like doing this hotkey does this different thing, or how to orbit around. It's all pretty much the same at the end of the day. There's different, functionality, but I think it's helpful to learn Blender first because in many ways it's quite challenging. A lot of the stuff to kind of create an end product, especially like motion graphics, it takes a lot of time. So kind of starting with that and really learning that. And then if you move to something like Cinema 4D, it's so much easier working in Cinema 4D. A lot of the work is done for you. You just throw on like an effector, like a cloner, a lot of their MoGraph tools they have built in. It just does a lot of your heavy lifting for you. With Blender, it's a lot of almost like programming. They have geometry nodes, which pretty technical at face value. Once you kind of get more comfortable, it becomes a little bit easier, but it's challenging, off rip if you're just starting to learn this stuff. So, having that very challenging experience, then moving elsewhere, it's helpful in many ways, I think.
Yeah, that's really nice. Start with Blender. Another question for you from Kukaracha95, and you touched on this earlier, but just a quick recap. How do you come up with your ideas and concepts for your animations?
Yeah, it's a lot of being inspired by what I see in my surroundings outdoor. I feel like I'm very connected to nature. I mentioned that I'm training for a marathon. One thing I do is just run around a lot. And so when I'm running around, I'll just take my phone or my camera with me, just take pictures of what I see and try to recreate that in the 3D software. I love just kind of observing nature and trying to channel that for like a lot of the artwork that I put together. So tapping in that inspiration. Also looking at other artwork as well too, whether it be in a museum, here on Instagram, elsewhere. There's a lot of things that kind of all come together to inspire me. Listening to music helps me out a lot. Also just going to, vintage furniture shops. There's a couple cool places here in DC that I'll go to and just kind of wander around. The way they've like staged spaces is kind of cool to kind of see the interior design, their kind of inspiration. Then taking that into my own space as I kind of like design out my own cozy oasis here, but also as I kind of design my dream spaces in 3D, it's super helpful. Random fun fact, but when I was moving in my first apartment, I actually built it in 3D and like kind of placed things where I wanted in my software. So I could kind of like design out like this dream space before I actually moved in. And I kind of like to do that as well whenever I'm kind of like redesigning or putting things differently in my space. It's kind of cool to just do that in 3D first. It's, also less lifting. You don't have to, move all those things around until you know exactly where it's going to be. So, yeah.
So funny. I'm not surprised either that you modeled out your room, your house.
It worked. It's nice. It's been cozy.
I mean, I see the plants. I see the lighting. You basically have a moon or a sun like orb lamp. It's like
this one right here. Yeah. And I got some other cool ones too. I'm not sure how well you can see this one, but this is like kind of this cool like lantern type thing. I put a lot of lanterns in my 3D renders. This is one that I got actually that inspired a lot of my 3D renders. I've got a matching one in my other room. It's kind of this cool like glowing little lantern. Yeah, I like that warm lighting for like, kind of like the lounge spaces in both real life and also my renders.
Oh, cool. We're going to do maybe 2 more questions before I let you go because it's almost been an hour. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, yeah.
This is an interesting question from Isn't It Useless? Do you follow what people like the most and try and do more of that, or do you just get inspired?
So can you repeat that one more time? Someone is trying to call in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Cut out my audio there.
The question is, do you follow what people like the most and try and do more of that, or do you just get inspired and then create?
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to the conversation I was having about the numbers game. I think it's often easy to get distracted by what's performing well. Everything is very, numbers based on all social media. You can very clearly see, I guess, what's performing well, but at the end of the day, it's almost completely random. There's stuff that I think will do really well that doesn't, and other things I'm like, this is a kind of a throwaway, whatever, that just takes off and does really well. So it's not really good for, I feel like, your mental health to focus on the numbers game. And I feel like the more I fixate on that, the worse I do, both in terms of my mental health and also in terms of the performance, ironically enough, of the work that I'm putting out. And when I just don't even care about it at all, like if I'm just not even looking at my stats, my engagement, whatever, and just creating for the sake of creating, I feel like so much happier, so much more inspired creatively. I'm doing what I personally love doing. And then I just kind of let the rest just fall into place as it may. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but just creating for the sake of creating, it's just, for me, it's so much more fulfilling too as an artist to just be doing what I love doing. And it's great to see that people really resonate with the work I'm putting out. And some people will, some people won't always, and that's fine. You're not gonna like every single thing I put out. Maybe it'll play to your taste more than something else, but it's just at the end of the day, it's whatever makes me happy. And I think that is most important, kind of be creating based on that philosophy.
Yeah, totally. I mean, take the pressure off, the pressure of Instagram, the pressure of social media. It can be a lot. Create for yourself, mental health. I mean, I think those are all very important things to touch on. And I love that you're also kind of getting out there and exercising and running a marathon. I mean, talk about mental health, talk about like getting off the computer. That's where it's at also, about that balance.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think for me, the running for the past couple of years, really, I've gotten really into it. It's very much a meditative experience for me. I very much get the runner's high and can just feel like I'm just running forever. I feel like I can just keep going. I've got like a lot of different playlists that I'll curate and listen to that as I'm going. And I just kind of get in my element, in my zone. And it's just been very healing in many ways, both physically and also mentally, just to kind of go for those long runs.
Totally. Any last plugs, James? Anything you're working on? I know that people can find your work on social media. Give James a follow if you don't already. Do you have any like prints or things for sale, things that, people can access besides your tutorials, of course, that you want to shout out to?
Yeah, I just actually started selling with a new service that has a lot of my prints available in stores, actually, at places like Target, Home Goods, a lot of those stores. So you might come across it in real life there if you go there, but also it's available online. I've got it linked in my profile if you want to go there. You can find the links to all my prints. I have some screensavers that you can purchase as well to use for your phone. I'm always adding new things there. I do have a Patreon. I will often add some of my scenes that I can upload that aren't client projects, that aren't, other things that are paid onto there as well for you to kind of peruse and use as well. And then, I guess in terms of projects, there's a lot in the mix, both for the freelance stuff here and also for NASA. As I mentioned earlier, there's this new streaming platform that we just launched or announced called NASA Plus. It's completely free. You just got to sign up for it. We've got a lot of really awesome content that I'm actually producing that'll be coming to there that's more long form than what I've typically done, which is a really cool style to kind of edit to as well. Typically we do like a lot of, shorter format content that you'd see like on Instagram Reels or on YouTube or YouTube Shorts. But I spent a lot of time to really craft these huge TV episodes. I'm talking like 30-minute, kind of like Drive to Survive, those types of format shows. A lot more engaging, really shows the people behind the science, the people behind the magic, to really just show you what NASA's all about, what we're doing behind the scenes, and then shows you that end product too. So one of them is that asteroid sample return mission I mentioned that's coming up September 24th. It's going to be returning, rain or shine, a sample of this asteroid here to Earth. Next year, we've got some huge moments for the Artemis program, which is our return to the moon with humans and then onward to Mars. I'm deeply involved with that as well, too. So there's a lot of really cool stuff coming up with that to track as well. And then, of course, almost every single day that James Webb Space Telescope is creating or is capturing incredible imagery from around the universe. I'm deeply involved with that as well, too. So definitely keep an eye out for all of that stuff. There's a lot in the mix that I'm working on that I'll definitely keep people up to date with here on Instagram, on YouTube, elsewhere, too. But yeah, super, super excited for the weeks and months to come.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much, James. Thank you, everyone that joined us. We are going to save this conversation on our Instagram. We'll put it up on Vimeo. There's a lot of good information here if you want to go back and visit it, share it to a friend. And yeah, James, asteroids, meteors, aliens, you're going to go win a marathon. A lot just happened. Thank you for joining us. That was really great. And of course, feel free to reach out to H Plus, reach out to James, pick up his work, give him a follow, and we will do this again soon. But thank you for your time, everybody, and thank you, James, and that was lovely.
Thanks so much. As always, yeah, great chatting, great catching up. Always love doing these.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful day.